Hi there, and welcome to Leadershipisation, all things leadership. My name is Beth Bergen. I'm a global leadership and communication coach. My goal is to build influential leaders, and I'm all about working with executives, with managers, and with business owners so that they can lead and communicate with clarity, with confidence, and with absolute impact. So I'm here most Tuesdays live at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I want to talk about burnout. It's real. It's a real thing. Mental Health First Aid Australia recognises that 61% of Australian workers report burnout. Now, what's kind of scary for Australia is that globally, it's reported at 48% of workers. Now, when we think about burnout, it has an economic impact, and that's a very real part of why it's essential to look at recognizing, managing, and preventing burnout. The economic impact of burnout and stress and the leave that's associated with that is costing us around about $14 billion annually. That's a lot of money. That's a big economic impact. 25% of workers who experience burnout say nothing at all to their manager. So they're still in the workplace feeling and experiencing the burnout, which means that they're likely not particularly productive. In the Gallup 2023 poll or State of the Global Workplace report, they identified that 47% of Australian employees were affected by daily stress. They were affected by daily stress. And burnout has now become recognised by the World Health Organization as an occupational phenomenon. So when you start to add all of those things together, you can see that it's really important that we start to have that conversation about recognizing it, about managing it, and about preventing burnout and some strategies for doing that. So, you know what I like to do when I'm having these conversations with you? I always think it's a great idea to actually start with what is burnout, to get back to the basics of what is burnout. Well, there are a number of different definitions, but what I've tried to do is to bring them together so that there's a clear explanation. Something, just clarity that you can actually work with. It's really a state of physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. It's kind of like I'm cooked, I'm worn out. It's caused by prolonged and excessive stress at higher levels for longer periods of time than you can reasonably deal with. And what happens is that it generally shows up, the most common way that it shows up is that low energy, there's that reduced professional efficacy, and there's a real lack of interest. So things don't seem to matter quite so much. What is it that contributes to burnout? Well, it's a really complex mix. It's a really complex mix of organizational factors, job-specific factors, and individual human being factors. It might be a combination of some of these. It could be about excessive workloads, so that, the workload that you have is over the top. It's way too much. If that workload is compounded because there are unclear expectations about exactly what you should be doing, then that makes it even more likely. Put on top of that some poor leadership, some indecisive leadership, people not being able to provide clarity, and we're starting to get some of the really major ingredients for burnout right there. Things also like a lack of recognition. No one's actually identifying that I'm struggling with this. I'm feeling all alone. I'm feeling undervalued. For lots of people, not only is there that lack of recognition, but there's insufficient support for people. There's insufficient support for staff. Maybe there's not enough staff to actually do the work that's required into particularly the kind of deadlines that are required. Potentially, there could be really high emotional demands on the job. Maybe you're not sure about whether the business, the company, the organization is going is going to exist long term. Perhaps there's some feeling of job insecurity because maybe there's a restructure happening. Perhaps there are whispers in the background, excuse me, which are adding to your uncertainty. They're only some of the factors that might be organizational, they might be economic factors, they might be about the job. Then if what you do is add in our own individual perception and how we actually see the world, there's a whole bunch of other things that start to hit hard, and these are things that can really exacerbate burnout. Now, these are things like, I'm a perfectionist. I want to work until I actually get it right. And if I'm not work until I get it right, then I've got this imposter syndrome where I believe that maybe I don't deserve the job anyway. Maybe I could do the job a whole heap better if only I spent longer doing it, or if only I understood it better, if only I knew everything there was to know. Those two things are kind of like the icing on the burnout cake. If your job requirements and organizationally, there's a whole lot going on out of those factors that I was just talking about. Individuals also have a low resilience. And when individuals have a low resilience, and particularly if they don't put their hand up and ask for assistance, then what happens is that they feel the impact of the stress and the frustration a whole lot faster than someone in the same team in exactly the same situation. They feel that a lot quicker. Now, personally, not only do we have the organization and the job requirements to deal with, we also might have some stuff going on for us. So there might be external stuff that's going on, like family, like your finances, like, I need to move, or we're wanting to buy a house, but that's proving almost impossible. Right now, in many countries across the world, there's a real economic uncertainty. So that's another external stressor. What's going on? Prices seem to be going up and up and up. So, I'm kind of thinking at work, there's a whole lot of hassle. There's a whole lot of stuff going on at work that's really stressing me out, but I'm also getting that away from work. That economic uncertainty, all of those things are the things that, from an individual perspective, add to burnout. And you add to that, like you heard me say before, that only 25% of people put their hands up to let their managers know. There's a whole stigma about being weak. So we just keep on working. Hi, Jay, how are you? Great to have you here. So what we see the entire time is that there's this stigma. I've got to tough it out. I've got to be seen to be doing the best that I can. Now, for some people, working from home has been a godsend. But I certainly know for teams, individuals in teams of clients that I worked with, particularly during the COVID phase where social distancing was required, and there were a number, depending on what country in the world or what part of what particular countries you were in, there was a lot of pressure on us to behave in a certain way and follow specific rules. The downside of working from home and how it can actually contribute to burnout is through that isolation. So it might be that they're isolated and don't have the opportunity to kind of download some of the issues that are going on for them. It might be that there's so much technology going on, there's so much digital stuff, they're always having to be on Zoom or Teams calls. There's a little messengers coming backwards and forwards all the time. Maybe people get burnout because they feel like they never have any quiet time to get on with the actual work because there's always all this contact going on. The other thing that can happen that's very real is that for some leaders, for some managers, the fact that they can't see you when you're working from home means that they choose to micromanage. And when you are micromanaged and you can't make a decision yourself, you have no autonomy, that's another thing that adds to the potential for higher levels of stress and frustration and higher levels of burnout. So how do we actually recognize, like they're the factors that might contribute to burnout? How do we actually recognize it? Well, like many things, there's no one size fits all. So as the team leader, as the manager, what's really important is that you understand, you know, and you understand your staff well enough, your team well enough, so that you can look at each of them individually to see what's going on for them. Maybe there's uncharacteristic work performance. Perhaps someone who's always been awesome at meeting work deadlines, they seem to be missing them all the time. Maybe someone who's been a really clear and timely communicator, that communication has just gone all wobbly. It's really poor now. Another thing for you to notice, and you know, I talk a lot about one tool for leadership intelligence is noticing what you're noticing. So notice and look for those signs of tiredness. Are they arriving a bit late? Are they irritable? Are they easily distracted? You know, are they yawning a lot? Are there real signs of fatigue? Because this is a real giveaway for burnout. Another thing for you to notice, don't have to necessarily comment on it, but just notice and keep a record of it or keep it in the back of your mind. Perhaps there might be sudden mood changes. You know, there's someone who's been the life of the team, maybe they're socially withdrawn a whole lot. Maybe the amount of interaction that they have with other people changes in a noticeable way. And maybe what you see when you're giving them some feedback or you're giving them an additional task or responsibility, maybe what you see is this physical reaction to it. You know, do I really have to be doing that? They may not say anything, however, their body potentially will give them away. Now, the tricky thing about this is that, as I've said, it's about noticing what you're noticing in others, but it's also about you noticing what's going on with you. So look for these same things, these same potential flags about burnout in yourself, not just in other people, and start to ask some questions. Like, ask people how they're feeling. Ask them how they're feeling. And so often we don't ask that simple question. Looking directly at the person, how are you feeling here? Make sure as a leader that what you're doing is coming across as human. So it's perfectly okay to be human and share those stories about how stress builds up for you or how you might manage burnout. Show some empathy for people so that what we know is that they're confident that you've got their back. And that's what's really important. Check in with people. Check in with them personally and regularly. Now, this doesn't mean walking through an open office going, morning. No. If you're worried that someone has burnout, if you're worried that your team has been working really, really hard on a project, it's actually about taking the time to talk with them personally and regularly. It's not about sending them a message saying, can you come into my office, please? It's actually just about quietly approaching them and checking in. Eye contact while you're doing it so that they know that it's real. Like, this human contact is really important for people, because what we can forget is that all of these organizational or job-related factors that might contribute to burnout, because each human being is unique, the human factors, that human element that we put over the top of it, is just as important. And so it's kind of about finding out what's going on for people. You know, maybe there's a new baby in a household. Maybe a relative, a friend, a parent has been really sick. There are a whole lot of those kinds of things that are going to happen. So how do we manage burnout? Well, what we've got to do, firstly, from the leadership perspective, what we need to do is to implement and model boundaries. Now, you've heard me talk before about boundaries. They're really important things. They're really important things, and there's something that we forget so often to implement and to hold on to in our work environment. Well, for many of us, we don't have really strong boundaries, not only at work, but also in all areas of our life. So important to do things like being prepared to take half days. You know, we talk all the time about taking mental health days. Encourage that for people, particularly if they're really heavily into a deep project and it's not going to impact the time frames. Like, you're better to send someone home for half a day to have them recover a little bit than to kind of have them keep on grinding and fall over. You know, I forget who it was who once said to me that 80% working at 80% of your capability 100% of the time is a whole heap better than working at 120% for 60% of the time. Yeah. And that's kind of relevant here. Make sure that people are taking that time out and that you're doing it as well. It's also important when you're managing your own diary to look at scheduling quiet times, scheduling times that you can have a break from work at work. It might be that there's thinking time that's required. It might be that you just need to be away from everyone else. Now, if you're not actually in control of your own diary, make sure you talk to the person who is managing your diary to tell other people to butt out. They can't just put meetings across meetings or times that you've already identified in your diary. That's really imperative. Another strategy that you can take is this: review the workload. Review the workload of the individual, streamline those priorities for them. So, not everything that they're going to do or that they're responsible for doing will be urgent. Not everything is urgent. And like, we are addicted to having meetings. Some 60-minute meetings could easily be 30-minute meetings. Some 30-minute meetings could easily be 15-minute meetings. A whole lot of meetings could be dealt with an email. So it's really about identifying, what is the purpose of us meeting? And do we all need to be in the room for this period of time? In fact, do all of us need to be in the room? Sometimes some organizations I work with are addicted to having as many people in the room as they can. And so what happens is a decision is never made in a timely fashion because we've got too many perspectives to consider. So they're all the kinds of things that add to burnout because people feel they've got to go to the next meeting. Set some boundaries around your availability. Your availability for meetings, your availability for calls, and also around the time that you answer emails. You do not have to answer emails as soon as they come in, because that adds to your burnout. You're feeling, oh, I've got to be reactive to every single message that comes in. This is a kind of an outside work thing, but it's a really important one. Put some exercise in your calendar. Don't just put it in your calendar. You actually have to do it. So make sure that you're doing that exercise, because of that will help to manage those stress levels. And also be looking for that, what I call harmony, in other areas of your life. For those of you who know me, I don't believe in work-life balance. I think that's rubbish. It's all about a harmony so that we can get both areas of your life singing, but we've got to do some work to actually get that harmony. So in your leadership role, critically, that active listening. We've talked about that a whole lot. I've identified that in terms of leadership intelligence, it's an essential tool for you to have. So talk about the issues. Talk about how people are feeling before the whole thing gets way too big for you or your team member to manage. Make sure with that active listening that what you're doing is listening first. Don't listen thinking, I can solve this. I'm on fire here. I've got a solution. Get to the root cause so that what you're doing as a result of your active listening and that gentle curiosity that we've talked about, as a result of doing those two things, you're getting to the root cause. Then you can look at what is the solution, because you're going to put the right solution there. Make sure that you've got some flexibility so that you can plan some time off in advance. Give people the flexibility to do that. Think about creative work schedules. Think about maximizing energy and talent so that you haven't got someone doing a whole lot of stuff that they don't necessarily need to be doing because it's not a priority. All the time watching and listening for that overwhelm. It's also important that you ensure that workloads are fair, right? We all know of teams where, just give it to that person to do. That'll be awesome. Make sure that across all the groups that you're responsible for, those workloads are fair. Make sure that there's real clarity around the expectations and that each team member understands what the outcomes are and what success looks like. Share those priorities and keep an eye out again, that notice what you're noticing. Keep an eye out for working hours and the level of productivity. And in there, providing them with support as they need it. It's also important that you provide certainty and autonomy, that people understand where the reporting lines are and that they're really clear about what their job responsibilities are. And that way, it's easier for you when there's all this clarity about expectations and the workloads are fair. It makes it a whole heap easier to set those realistic deadlines so that you can remove that low value or that busy kind of work, and that what they're doing is attending meetings only that are relevant to their role, not lots of meetings for the sake of going to meetings. You can offer those resources and support. You can provide a situation where it's safe to talk. Now, what you can do is begin as a leader to recognize potential signs of burnout. If you're practicing that leadership intelligence skill of noticing what you're noticing, and you're putting some strategies in place to be able to manage it because you're demonstrating those things for yourself, you're setting those boundaries, that's a real combined effort. And it will be to your benefit because you will establish that rapport and that conversation with individual team members about burnout. That's it for today. Thank you so much. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them on the platform where you're watching this. Love it for you to put hashtag replay so that we know that you're there. Remember, I build influential leaders, those who can lead and communicate with clarity, with confidence, and with influence. Being able to recognize burnout, potential signs of burnout, and prevent it before it starts to happen in your team is one of the ways that you can build influence. Reach out if you're interested in working with me further. Bye now.